Welcome, everybody, to episode 83 of the Racing Line podcast. It's just Joe here today, and we're here back with friend of the podcast, if we can say that, Joey Mawson, on for part two. A bit over a year since he's come on, and a lot has changed. Two times F5000 champion, going for a three-peat in the box seat to do that as well. And also recently in the news about the whole dilemma about getting a super license to run in the endurance races in 2023. We're going to hear from the man himself. So thank you, Joey, for being here.
Thank you. That should be
very impromptu, and you got back to me ASAP, so I didn't want to sort of squander the opportunity. So firstly and foremost, how you been doing? You tell me you're on a work camp. Just how's life treating you at the moment?
Yeah, no, life's been very good. Obviously, very much enjoying a successful season in S5000. So, just riding the wave at the moment, really, while it's all good and successful. Other than that, work's good, family's good. So, happy days.
How has it been? Well, the last time we spoke to you, were just one-time champion at the time, but having backed up and on the way to doing it again, has your outlook at sort of racing in that championship changed at all due to the last 2 years of success, or is it sort of very similar to how it was before?
No, I mean, the only thing that changes, obviously, from year upon year, is obviously after the success, you have a little bit more confidence within yourself to know you can do it. But as far as the mindset goes, it's still all the same. You're always trying to improve every weekend. I mean, even now, I feel like I'm only just starting to get my head around these, S5000 cars, which is probably, I guess, where some of the success is coming from this season. I've been constantly learning, and this year I've also been able to benefit from the funding from Team 88 and ACM Finance. So, for example, I experienced my first test day at Winton, which is literally my first test day in an S5000 car, even though I've been driving it for now going into my third season. So, obviously bits and pieces like that help. But at the same time, it's been exciting as well to have different contenders every year. Obviously in year one, it was Thomas Randall. In year two, it's been Jimmy Golding. And this year it's young Cooper Webster, as far as being a championship contender.
I will say quickly, but even that doesn't mean anything, the new livery on the car does look amazing. It was funny at this when that rolled out. I was looking for the black, I think was it black and red BRM car, and then I was like, oh, I'm looking for the wrong colors. But it does, it is a striking and a really, really gorgeous livery. So that's actually probably an interesting point to pick on. So you've been in the championship. This is now your third year, and you've only other than actual sort of practice qualifying and racing, this is the first you've actually been able to have a dedicated practice session. And
correct.
Can you go into sort of the finances that it takes to go on a practice session for one of these cars?
Yeah, I don't know the exact cost, to be honest, because obviously my sponsor's covering it all, but it's it would definitely be in the 5 digits.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So that's and what part of sort of improving your racing style in terms of racing these cars do you think you've got on top of the most this year? Because I suppose that running now as your third year, you have had, the car hasn't changed, so you have had a lot of sort of practice qualifying and race sessions to really hone those skills. But even still, like 3 years in, that's to still be picking up stuff, and probably that could also show why you are so dominant now, because you've just had that much time in the car. What part of the sort of driving style have you really been honing in on recently then?
I think it's just understanding the tire, understanding how to get best out of the tire. I mean, obviously now we've reset again because we're on the soft tire, but it's really just understanding the feeling on the braking. And a few times now when I've got kind of lost on a race weekend in the past, I can understand why, just because the approach to the driving style was wrong. And yeah, obviously when you have a test day, you can also try you have the opportunity and time to try different things. When you're on a race weekend, you're kind of just optimizing what you have. You can't flip the car upside down because you only got 2 practices and they're 20 minutes on old tires. So Yeah, the test day just allows you to just test stuff to get new new mindset on certain things, and also for me to just back up stuff and try different stuff with the driving as well.
It's awesome. Well, I might actually go to the questions I was probably going to leave for the end, which was sort of about your forays into GT3 racing with the Bathurst 12 hour, but this might segment a little bit better. So driving a GT3 car then is totally different, I'm guessing, from anything you've driven before. And
Yep.
the stuff that you've driven are all very different. You know, the European Formula cars coming. I think you said you started here in a Porsche Cup car. Have you tested a supercar?
Yes, so I've tested the Gen 3, I've tested the Gen 2. I've done
Okay.
2 evaluation days with one day with Brad Jones Racing, one day with Walkinshaw.
Okay.
And then I had the opportunity to do about 15 laps in the Gen 3 with Premier Racing, which was at the Supercars official test day, and then also at a private test day in Queensland Raceway.
Okay. So how does the GT3 car sort of differ from all the different cars you've driven? Especially, I think you guys have recently driven the 5,000 cars at Bathurst as well. So how was it jumping into a GT3 car in like a proper race as well around the mountain?
They're incredible. I actually found probably the GT3 was probably more impressive around Bathurst than the S5000.
Yep.
The cars are so stiff, they're so nimble, they got so much aero. It actually felt more like a single seater around there. The feeling that I've had compared to single seaters I've driven in the past, like the Formula 3 in the GT3 car, than it did compared to when I drove the S5000 there. So, yeah, mega experience. I mean, the cars have come a long way. Yeah, you can just feel the technology and just the money that's gone into them now.
Yeah.
They're really, really an expensive and amazing product to drive.
And I know you're very into your fitness, but how was it? Like, what was the longest stint that you had to do in that 12-hour race? And did it sort of differ from anything you'd done before? And did you have to change your mindset?
100%, 100%. So, yeah, I mean, up until that point, I've never really done a stint more than an hour, which was in a go-kart. So in a race car, I've never done more than half an hour, let's say. So, I think in the opening stint, I was just under 2 hours.
Yep.
So I actually found when I got out the car, my glutes were completely locked because when I'd done my seat, I was only doing like 8 lap runs. So I never really sat in the car for long enough. So I realized my seat was too tight around my glute area and was kind of pressing into my glutes and locking them. So, yeah, obviously you get very dehydrated as well. I probably finished one of the water bottles in one of the stints. I was almost having water every lap, particularly because I wasn't running the aircon to try and get more power out of the
Oh,
car.
okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I find in endurance you really get into a zone, particularly obviously when there's a lot of traffic around. The stints tend to go very quick, and you're kind of just racing yourself and trying to really just pace yourself to be able to make minimal mistakes and just run as consistent as you can. So a little bit of a different mentality to sprint racing, for sure.
Are you sort of compromising on your speed due to the length of the race? Like, are you sort of running more to a number than your outright pace because it's a 12-hour race and there's no real point sort of risking it until you sort of get to that last couple stints? Like, was that a different sort of mentality for you as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, yeah, you're building into it, obviously, as it's a long race, because yeah, obviously in a sprint race, you basically you got those 12 laps and that's it. The race is done. So you're trying to push straight away from the start. Whereas a 12-hour, the worst thing you can do is make a mistake or stick it in the wall. So you're really pacing yourself throughout the whole race. Obviously, the track is evolving as well. So I found myself, and just like most of the quick drivers in the field, doing our best laps on the last 2 hours, hour of the race, for
Well,
sure.
I was there last year, not this year, and the conditions as well. It was so wet,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd never because I had never been held in the middle of the year. Most of the times we'd gone up there, it was like really nice, sunny. The sun comes up early because it was in summer. And then we
Mm-hmm.
got there and it was dark and it was darker for longer. And did you say you started the race as well?
Yeah, I did
So how was
actually.
that
Yeah.
driving in the dark, driving in the dark and the wet? I mean,
Uh,
that's like
yeah, it was
baptism of
nuts.
fire.
It was. It was. I wasn't actually meant to start the race. But then, yeah, after we had that crash, Nick Percat said, "No, I'd prefer for Joey to start." So,
Man, that's a
yeah,
big vote of confidence.
yeah, it was a big vote of confidence indeed. I wouldn't say I wasn't confident, but I definitely was nervous because obviously it's dark. You know, you're starting a race. The start of the race is normally where it's a little bit hectic as well because the pros are generally, not giving an inch.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm pretty sure I had Mara Engel who finished second in the end, behind me for most of the opening stint, which was pretty nuts. So he was trying to overtake me in places over the top, and yeah, it was nuts. So
Is that
yeah,
is that a is that a race that you're interested in doing again in the future?
yeah, definitely,
Yeah, yeah.
definitely, yeah,
Like
absolutely,
I think the first time I went there was maybe about probably 6 or 7 years ago, actually, now that I think about it. Um,
yeah,
and it's like there hasn't been a sort of a race event in Australia that I've been to that is sort of that I think is encapsulated, European racing. I think like that. It's like it's got its own very different feel.
hmm
One thing I think that has been great, like sort of with the COVID reset, was that we got to see a lot more of the Australian drivers, Australian teams, sort of at the forefront. Whereas sort of the
yep,
years before, when you had that influx of the European teams and drivers coming in, it was harder to sort of feel that attachment.
yep,
And I hope even though from what we're hearing that it's going to be another bumper year next year, I still hope that sort of the broadcast and the Australian drivers and teams that are on display sort of get a little bit more of that time in the sun, because like really you are the guys that we sort of hear about every day, and in the other categories, whether it's supercars or the speed series drivers as well who are involved. They're sort of the ones that it's easier to sort of feel an attachment to, because you're the ones we hear about for the rest of the year, I suppose, until that event again.
yep,
um
yep.
that's good to hear. All right, so let's sort of get into the meat and the potatoes of why I thought it'd be interesting to have a chat with you. And it's this whole sort of super license. Would you call it a dilemma for you at the moment?
Yeah, it's definitely a dilemma. I mean, it's yeah, it's been going on for quite a while in the media. Obviously, it's probably since February. So
So you
yeah,
said you said before you did your test with Newland Racing. Will that be
mhm.
who you'll be racing for if you were to get the license?
Yes, correct, correct.
And
So that would have been Slade.
how do you get to do a testing without in the official test without a super license, but then aren't able to race the car without the super license? Like what's the difference, I suppose, number one, and then what is it that us plebs don't understand about attaining this super license? Because most people who sort of sort of follow their racing half decently would know sort of what you've done before and where you
Hmm
came from, and not necessarily that should be a prerequisite for getting a super license. But it's not like you
hmm
went there and you did nothing. You were probably one of the when you were in Europe, probably you were the Australian sort of poster boy at the time.
hmm
And not to sort of like um sort of shine sunlight up your ass, but you were a big thing for those of us who are here. And it wasn't like you didn't perform; you performed very well. So, what is it that you then need to sort of what boxes did you need to tick to actually get this thing?
I mean, yeah. Firstly, the offer came from Premier, having competed in S5000 and had the success that we have. I mean, one of Premier's full-time drivers is Jimmy Golding, who's been one of my rivals throughout the S5000 seasons.
And who you've
Um,
beaten?
and, and yeah, I don't like to brag about it, but who I've been fortunate to beat. So yeah, and then also I drove with Tim Slade, who was my teammate for one round in Tasmania, and I guess you could say he's given me a favour back because we end up clashing that weekend
Okay.
in race two. So yeah, Tim obviously initiated the offer. I've also built a relationship with Peter Zibris, in the past season, chatting to him at the track in the weekends that share the race weekends with S5000. but yeah, that was how the offer initially started. And then, yeah, when I was at the test, one of the team bosses came up to me and told me that I wouldn't be allowed to drive. Having not done Super Two.
So that's the sticking point, is it the fact that you haven't done Super 2?
Yes, correct. That's the main thing. Yeah.
And you can only attain a super license from doing Super 2?
Well, that's the argument that they're pushing at the moment. That's the whole reason why they're not wanting me to give me dispensation. The fact that I haven't done Super Two. Ironically, if I was a gold status driver in the FIA driver grading, I would, I would be allowed to start. That's the kind of loophole. But because I'm a silver, they won't allow me to drive having not done the 6 races of Super Two. So that's where I got blocked really from having that opportunity.
Okay, so what they're saying is you either have to do, and does it matter on the results of your performances in Super 2, or is it just you have to do your 6 races?
Pretty much, you just have to do your 6 races.
And see, that doesn't make much sense to me. And I know like we've had quite a few Super 2 drivers who have done wild cards, and even some who like even Bathurst wild cards. I think the Chatter did a wild card last year, I think it was. So so that is a sticky one. And then in the what the news article that sort of sparked this again for me was very recently. So what is it now? Supercars is applying on your behalf to the FIA to get that driver rating changed mid-year. Is that the
Motorsport Australia is?
So
Motorsport Australia. Yeah.
And what is the realistic chance of it getting changed mid-season?
Probably not much, because it's difficult. I mean, the FIA don't do the driver ratings till the end of the year, till November, December. Generally, drivers are always wanting to get downgraded, not upgraded. Obviously, in this case, I need to be upgraded for the Supercars situation. And of course, it's not the FIA's problem, so they're
it's a back burner issue for them.
Yeah, it's a back burner issue for them. It's not really their problem. So obviously we're playing them with them through Motorsport Australia to be able to change it. Obviously from the news articles that we got through Speed Cafe, it looks as though Supercars would be willing to give me dispensation, but obviously they'd prefer not to. They'd prefer for me to have the gold status so that they still enforce the 6 race for 2.
Okay, so it's sort of become now a matter of semantics that if you can get your gold rating, it's better for them, because then another driver can't use you sort of as a reason. Like, well, I can't remember. I don't know what the law word is. I know what I'm thinking, but they can't use you as an example in the future and say, but Joey got a dispensation, so give it to me.
Yeah, so that's their biggest fear as well. I'm sure they would like to help me out, and they understand I'm probably a different case, a unique case with the experience that I have. But at the same time, if they were to give me dispensation, then it would probably open the floodgates for many other young drivers, which, in my opinion, would be a good thing. But obviously, then would defer their Super 2, enforcing their Super 2 races.
Well, I think we had it was when we had Nathan Hearn on, and he was discussing this as well about the sort of the budget that you need to go Super 2 racing, and how I never knew how sort of astronomical that was as well, just to go Super 2 racing. But he was sort of saying the same thing. I think that's why he's moved to that was one of his sort of pushes to go to America, was he said, I've done what I can in Australia, sort of in the Trans Am with the budget I've got. And he said, like, realistically, I don't have that budget here to go Super 2 racing and go supercar racing. So it's better off for me to sort of go overseas and try and make something there, because it's sort of such a closed licensing, especially when you think of the amount of sort of racing that we have here now with the Australian GT Championship. We've got S5000. You've got the TCR Championship as well. A lot, and Trans Am. A lot of that good stuff that's on Speed Series. The fact that it is still sort of such a closed club in supercar land, and I think even Paul Morris made an interesting point that I didn't know about either this week with Kizzy going to NASCAR. He said he could go from here to there so easy, but like a cup driver from there coming here to race in supercars would still have to apply for that super license as well. And I was like, surely not, but it seems to be the case. How is it for you? Like realistically, motorsport is a sort of a path that you're trying to chase to sort of, I don't know if you'd say like make a living from it, but to sort of to have it closed due to such, well, you could, like, from an outsider looking in, such pointless reasons, considering that, like, if it was the same for one of the guys who have gone overseas now, as you know, like I was watching the Spa 24 last week, and Peroni was racing in that as well, and he wouldn't qualify for a gold license. But for those of us who like supporting our boys abroad, for them to not be able to partake in our events, it's such I feel like it's such a missed opportunity for the sport to sort of grab some of that younger sort of demographic who might be following their favorite drivers go abroad. But then also, like, for you, it's like, what is the point of going and trying to chance it in Europe? And then, you know, if you come back, you're still sort of kept out of the boys club because you haven't done 6 races of Super 2. Like, do you have a thoughts on that, considering that there aren't many of you guys who go across anyway? Like, it's a big leap of faith.
100%. I mean, it's almost like we're getting punished for, you know, trying to chase after the Formula One dream, because basically when we come back, we almost have to start from zero. And obviously it's a lot of money and investment and experience that goes into going to Europe. And yeah, in my case, I mean, I would have loved to have done Super 2, but the whole reason I can't is because the budget's just astronomical. So not everyone can drive in Super 2. So it's frustrating because they're narrowing the talent pool that can enter supercars by enforcing that. Not everyone can do Super 2. That's right. The reality. A lot of good drivers that are, you know, spread across many other categories, S5000, TCR, Trans Am, that the whole reason they're there and not in Super 2 is because they, you know, that's the budget that they can afford and are limited to. So,
100%. And just sorry, keep going. Sorry.
Oh, good. Yeah, and if you want to have the best drivers in the top series of Australia, you know, you want to be able to get the best scoop of talent pool.
That's right. And this has sort of opened my eyes a bit as well, because without just due to a bit of ignorance, in the last year we've sort of been discussing, like, where are the next wave of younger drivers, but if it is, you know, that if you have to sort of jump through those hoops to get a super license, in some ways it also gives the sort of old guard who are there, and, you know, whether or not you agree with me about who I've mentioned before, and not you, but like I've mentioned a few names before who do have a super license, it probably does extend their stay in the category as well, because there isn't as many people as, you know, you can probably choose from to actually come in, because you don't have a super license itself. For you to get upgraded from your silver rating to a gold rating, do you have to jump through any criteria for that as well, or you can just
no, absolutely you do. So technically I should have been a gold grade after having won the F4 championship, which classifies as a tier 2 championship. So I'm actually underrated, which is frustrating as well, because had I had gold, I would never have had this whole super license drama. And I think I'm pretty sure S5000 also counts as a tier 3 championship. So, you know, those 2 titles plus the F4 championship, I'd, you know, have more than enough credentials to be a gold status driver.
Do you have to apply for that gold status? Is that why it hasn't happened before? Okay.
Yes, you do. You do. And it's reviewed basically at the end of the year in November, December.
And when you went to this test day, not knowing
Yep.
that you weren't eligible due
Hmm.
to the fact that you didn't have a super license, or it
I'm
was
pretty
only
sure I was still allowed to test, even though it was a super license, because it was a test day. But
okay.
to actually race, you need to have a super license.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It never got brought up about me driving on a test day. It was the whole fact about trying to be on the grid.
okay. Well, like from the outside looking in, and this is sort of where it sort of doesn't mean much because we're just fans. But like I said before, the fact that there are sort of there's a level of drivers who, and like especially in your case, like we've had James Golding on here as well, and it's not like I'm bashing his talent at all because he's a great driver. But for him to then leave supercars, race directly against you, same as Tom Randall, but for them to have that sort of Super 2 career before you, and then you two in the same category, pretty much same cars, back-to-back champion, then not be able to sort of get into that group again, it just looks so odd from the outside. Like, I watch too much motorsport. For someone who's more casual than me, and it's like, how come this guy who I was watching last year race against this exact guy can't join the same club? It is so
Yeah.
bizarre, and I didn't realize it how bizarre it got till I'd read that article last week.
Hmm.
But my goodness, like it is sort of such a boys' club that and the fact is that you're the person who's getting punished most for it. You're in a realistic point of view, every year in motorsport is sort of a year you're not going to get back, and you're trying to get to that. You're sort of chasing that carrot, trying to get to that spot as quick as you can, because realistically, that's what
Absolutely.
everyone else is trying to do as well. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
like realistically, and I've sort of started looking into it more now, but it's really is like to the detriment of the fans who are the ones who sort of who watch it and want to say like what would happen if he had a chance. And like I've said this recently as well, like when you have a driver who's coming to the end of their career, you sort of get to an understanding of what their level is, and you understand like, all
Hmm.
right, so this guy is a, let's say, average sort of 16th 15th kind of driver. But then you sort of have this idea like if he was to get moved out, I'm not advocating for people to get moved out and all that kind of stuff, but like there is sort of always that unknown of, if we were to give it to a hungry driver who hasn't had that chance before. You drive a S5000, which everyone says is probably one of the closest cars to drive like a supercar in the way it handles, and you're great at it. And Jimmy Golding's had some great performances in this new supercar as well. It's sort of like
Absolutely.
it's all a game of like what ifs, and it's just like, come on, guys, let's just get it done and get it sorted for the fans. If
Hmm.
not for anyone, because they're the guys who like are really paying for the tickets and paying for the subscriptions, and they deserve to sort of see the best,
Hmm.
and make a new following for the Joey Mawsons, the Goldings, because the other guys can't stay there forever. It's a
Hmm.
it is a like a really like interesting sort of cycle, but also it comes across as such a dick around from the outside looking in. Um,
Hmm.
what is what do you think your chances are of making the supercars grid for these enduros, like realistically?
It's hard to
And
say, to be honest.
and
In
is it
in the last few weeks, it's definitely a lot better. But yeah, if you asked me 6 weeks ago, I would have said zero. If you ask
okay?
me now, it's certainly looking a lot more likely, but nothing's promised.
And has it been through like a lot of pushing from you to get this done, and from like Newland Racing, or is it now, has the onus sort of been taken by Motorsport Australia?
There's been a lot of push from other people behind the scenes. Obviously, not Neilon Racing are in a careful situation because as much as they want me, they're not going to upset supercars over an
Fair enough.
enduro
Yeah.
driver.
Yep.
Obviously, they're in support of me, but they can only do so much, but I've obviously had a lot of other people behind the scenes that have been pushing for me and putting a good word in for me and supporting me. And, that's been certainly a lot of help. For example, the Roland Dane's article, to get
Yeah.
it out in the media, to explain to the fans and everyone what the exact situation is and all the facts and figures. So, yeah.
I thought that was actually a really important article. That was probably the one that probably gave me the most clarity, to be honest, because regardless of, I know he has a lot of people who like him and a lot of people who don't like him, but regardless of if you like him or not, having a voice like that, sort of saying like this has to be reviewed because it's pretty much a travesty if it doesn't happen. And I'm guessing he did that on his own accord. Like he didn't go, Roland, write an article for me.
Yeah.
Like that has a lot of weight for the people in the sport. I mean, honestly, I'm just hoping for your sake and probably selfishly for our sake, that it all gets sorted in time, because like I said, years don't come back, and we want to see you have that opportunity as soon as possible. We've seen a lot of drivers recently who all they've needed is one great opportunity in a
Shot.
supercar. We've seen Stanaway do it, Golding's done it. Hopefully you can be Feeney did it. Hopefully you can be the next one. But thank you so much for your time and sort of shedding some light on that situation.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
We're going to be watching you still in the F5000s, but if we can see you in a supercar before the end of this year, that's going to be a fantastic, product for us to watch. Don't let us down though when that opportunity arises. Because there'll be a lot of words for nothing. But no, thank you so much for coming on and sort of just shedding some light on that. And we'll be pulling for you because, we just like seeing the talent sort of given that opportunity at the top.
Yep.
Right.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Joseph.
No worries, Joey. Thank you for coming on with us.